Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and today we are back with another extensive GPU benchmark video. This time we are heading to Mexico with a look at Forza Horizon 5. Developed by Playground Games, Forza Horizon 5 is a first-party Xbox title, and it is available publicly as of today on both Steam and Xbox Game Pass. I pre-ordered the premium edition though so I could get early access and spent the weekend benchmarking over 30 different GPUs to give you an idea of exactly how well this game performs. Diving right into it then with a look at the settings menu. Credit to Playground Games here, there is a very healthy selection of settings you can tweak, including your environmental texture quality, reflections, shadows and much more. At the very top though, there is also a selection of different quick presets, starting at very low, low, medium, high, ultra and extreme. For the bulk of our testing today then, we are going to be looking at the extreme preset at 1080p, 1440p and 4K, but for those with older or more low-end GPUs, we do also test the high preset at 1080p later on in this video, and we also look at more general preset scaling. Forza Horizon 5 does also feature a built-in benchmark, and initially I was looking at using this for my testing today. However, while the benchmark delivers performance that is broadly representative for what you'll see in-game while using an NVIDIA GPU, I actually found AMD GPUs performed much worse when using the benchmark compared to what I saw when actually playing the game. Take a look at this chart for instance. The delta in performance between the built-in benchmark and actual gameplay is pretty close for the RTX 3080, especially at 1440p and 4K. Taking 1440p as a specific example, here the 3080 performs just 10% worse in the built-in benchmark compared to my own test sequence. The AMD RX 6900 XT, however, performs 31% worse in the benchmark, making it a fair bit slower than the 3080, which just doesn't match up with the actual gameplay experience. For all my testing today then, I benchmarked a lap of the airport cross-country circuit, which in my experience did prove fairly typical of in-game performance. Of course, for all of our testing today, we are using the latest drivers from both AMD and NVIDIA, both of which list support for Forza Horizon 5. So for NVIDIA, we're using the 496.49 driver, and for AMD, it's the 21.11.1 driver. We're also using our regular GPU test system provided to us by PC Specialist, and this is built around an Intel i9-10900K overclocked to 5.1 GHz on all cores, paired with the Asus ROG Maximus 12 Hero motherboard, and we've also got 32GB of Corsair Vengeance DDR4 memory. The first area I want to look at then is actually going to be VRAM allocation, measured with an RTX 3090 at 1080p, 1440p and 4K, with both the extreme preset and the high preset. The reason I'm starting with VRAM is because clearly the extreme preset is very heavy on memory usage, with 7.8GB allocated at 1080p, 8GB at 1440p and about 8.5GB at 4K. Now that doesn't bode too well for your 4GB RX 570s or 4GB GTX 1650s, but we also tested the high preset and that is significantly less demanding in terms of memory. The game does also provide a warning message if it detects you're running out of VRAM, so it is definitely something to keep in mind. Getting into the raw performance data then, starting at 1080p with that extreme preset. Once more, I've split the charts in two here, so we'll look first at the lower performing half and then the faster half next. Right away, it doesn't take a genius to realise the slowest four performing GPUs on the chart are all of the 4GB cards we have tested. The 4GB 5500 XT is a particularly poor performer, especially compared against the 8GB version, though I am also on a PCIe 3.0 platform, which is likely to impact that as well. Still, for 1080p extreme settings, 4GB simply will not cut it. In fact, a number of 6GB cards also struggle, particularly the RX 5600 XT. Across my testing, it did seem to me that the AMD GPUs don't deal as well as NVIDIA GPUs when they have insufficient VRAM, and the 5600 XT is only fractionally faster than the GTX 1060 here, and has even got worse 1% lows. That being said, the fact that the RX 580 8GB and RX 5500 XT 8GB are able to drive a reasonable 45-ish FPS does actually suggest to me actual GPU processing requirements aren't unreasonably high, but VRAM is a problem for these settings. Further up the chart though, we do get some smoother sailing, with the GTX 1070 knocking on the door of a 60 FPS experience, while the RTX 2060 and Vega 56 just squeeze over the 60 FPS mark in terms of the average frame rate. Just before moving on though, I do need to mention the asterisk attached to the RX 5700 XT. For reasons unknown to me, I had significant issues with that GPU in Forza Horizon 5, even after trying 2 different 5700 XT cards and reinstalling the driver multiple times. Performance just was not stable with that GPU, and it's actually worse than the RX 5700 non-XT. As I say, absolutely no idea why, obviously shouldn't be happening, and hopefully that won't be your experience if you do have a 5700 XT, but given I tested 2 different cards with multiple driver uninstalls and it still happened, I decided to keep the data in, but obviously with that asterisk attached. Moving up to the higher performing GPUs on our chart then. Here, every single one of these kept the 1% lows above 60 FPS, and that's including the RX 6600, which is not bad for that GPU. The RX 6600 XT comes in 7% faster than the RTX 3060, while the 2070 and 2080 Super are just below and above the 100 FPS mark respectively. Above that, we can see the RX 6700 XT is only just faster than the RTX 3060 Ti, though the RX 6800 is about 8% faster than the RTX 3070. At the very top though, AMD is actually winning the battles. The margins aren't huge, but the RX 6800 XT delivers about an extra 10 FPS over the RTX 3080, while the 6900 XT is about 3% faster than the RTX 3090 in terms of average frame rate, but actually its 1% lows are 7% better. As for the 1440p data then, we're back with the slower half of the chart. Here, the RX 5500 XT 8GB model was the first GPU to deliver 30 FPS at all times, and I have to say, that is pretty decent. It's again showing that processing requirements aren't outrageous, you just need a good amount of VRAM for those extreme settings. The RX 5600 XT, GTX 1660 Super, RTX 2060 and GTX 1060 are all clumped fairly close together around the 40 to 45-ish FPS mark, but personally I'd want at least a Vega 56 for this resolution, with that GPU delivering 50 FPS average and 1% lows at 45 FPS. The RX 6600 and Vega 64 aren't much faster, and at the very top we can again see the RX 5700 XT with its weird issues I mentioned before, which are particularly evident in the 1% lows. We get closer to 60 FPS on the upper half of the chart though, but it isn't until the RTX 2070 Super where we get above 60 FPS at all times. The likes of the RX 5700 and the RTX 3060 can stay above 60 FPS in terms of the average frame rate, but not with the 1% lows. After that, the 2080 Super, 3060 Ti and RX 6700 XT are all performing basically the same, as are the 2080 Ti and 3070, delivering 95 to 96 FPS on average. Interestingly here, the RTX 3080 is actually closer to the RX 6800 than it is to the 6800 XT, though all 3 of those GPUs do break past 100 FPS. At the very top, the 6900 XT is again just fractionally faster than the RTX 3090, but with better 1% lows, where it delivers 125 FPS on average. Stepping up now to 4K, here we can honestly pretty much gloss over the entire lower half of the chart, as it isn't until Vega 64, which is actually second from top, that we get a GPU capable of keeping the 1% lows above 30 FPS, with the RX 5700 only just about faster. Jumping back up to the top half of the chart then, here we can see this cluster of 5 GPUs all at the bottom, delivering between 38 to 43 FPS with not a whole lot between them, though strangely the 5700 XT doesn't look so bad at 4K as it did at 1080p or 1440p. Personally though, I'd want at least a 2070 Super for 4K Extreme however, and better still are the 2080 Super, 3060 Ti and RX 6700 XT. Once more, all 3 GPUs are performing basically the same. The 3070 and 2080 Ti also managed to average over 60 FPS, but the RX 6800 is the first GPU to keep its 1% lows above 60. So if you do want a locked 60 FPS at 4K, that's the level we're looking at here. The 6800 XE is also just about edging the RTX 3080 here, though its 1% lows are a fair bit better, while at the very top you can't really split the RTX 3090 and the 6900 XT, with both GPUs averaging just shy of 90 FPS. That is the bulk of our testing done then, where we have used the Extreme preset, but now let's take a look at preset scaling so we can see just how scalable this game really is if you want to drop a few image quality settings in order to boost performance. Thankfully, the game is actually very scalable, so you can really pump the FPS quite high if you want to, but first it's worth starting at the bottom. As you can see here, I added a category which I called Max Settings, and that's because the Extreme preset doesn't actually put everything to its maximum value. A few settings like MSAA, FXAA and SSAO as well as reflections can actually go higher than the Extreme preset, so if you do that, performance will drop by 16%. To boost frame rates though, the Ultra preset comes in 30% faster than the Extreme preset, while dropping back to the High preset isn't far off double the performance of Extreme. Medium is only 12% more performant than High however, while the Low preset is over 250% faster than the Extreme preset. Very Low meanwhile of course delivers the highest FPS, with over 3 times the performance of the Extreme preset. Of course, you will want to weigh up what sort of visuals you are happy with and exactly how high you want that FPS counter to go, but for me, I think high settings is a sensible place to be. It still looks very good, and as we will see now, it is not nearly so demanding on older or lower end GPUs. Looking at the performance data for 1080p then using the High preset. The good news is even the RX 570 4GB and the GTX 1650 non-super will hold above 60 FPS at all times. So if you were worried by the Extreme preset testing, don't worry, GPUs with less than 8GB VRAM can still play the game. That said, the 4GB 5500 XT still showed some issues, although remember that is a PCIe Gen 4 x 8 interface, so using it on a PCIe 3.0 platform isn't ideal, but if you are doing that, you might encounter a few issues with performance. Still, the GTX 1060 and RX 580 are absolutely flying with these settings, both delivering over 80 FPS, while the GTX 1650 Super is even able to break 100 FPS. At the very top, the 1660 Super and RX 5600 XT are also delivering well over 100 FPS, while also keeping the 1% lows above that 100 FPS mark. So then, that is it for our performance data, and by and large I have to say I'm very impressed with Forza Horizon 5. You've likely already seen in other videos just how good looking this game is, and credit to Playground Games here, they have made absolutely beautiful environments, with the Mexican landscapes proving a wonderful backdrop for this racing title. That said, there are a couple of issues I wanted to point out, or things I would like to see improved, and the first is with the anti-aliasing. In game then, we've only got MSAA and FXAA options, so there's no TAA. In my experience, you will notice some shimmering, particularly on foliage and jungle scenes, while fine lines also tend to break up an artifact. It's honestly not dreadful, but it is a bit distracting, and the lack of TAA, which I think could well help with some of those issues, is a bit puzzling in my opinion. Secondly, texture pop-in is also noticeable. Less so if you are using extreme settings, but even then, during a lot of my testing with the high preset, I did notice this frequently, with trees and leaves popping into their higher quality versions as you drive by. I'm not sure if this could be optimized further to reduce pop-in. It is something every game has to deal with in some shape or form, but short of cranking up everything to extreme, it can look slightly jarring. The final thing I'd like to see then is proper ray tracing. Now I know this game does already support ray tracing, but only in Forza Vista mode. So honestly, I'm not really the kind of guy who wants to sit and stare at close-ups of different car models for hours on end, so that doesn't really appeal to me. I would, however, love to see proper ray trace reflections on your rear windscreen, for instance, or on the bonnet of the car as you're driving around. In fairness, the reflections used here do look very good, especially if you're really not focusing on them. However, if you do look at the rear windscreen here, you can see objects reflected in it do have a tendency to just disappear after a certain period of time. They just pop out entirely instead of getting smaller, while the reflections themselves aren't of the highest resolution. I am a big fan of ray trace reflections though, so I really think that would help with the immersion factor, especially if they came with the arrival of DLSS as well to help offset some of that performance loss. Wrapping up this video then, on the whole I am very impressed with Forza Horizon 5, and now all this testing is complete, I'm looking forward to getting in a proper playthrough. Credit to Playground Games though, as this is a beautiful looking game, and on the whole it does actually perform very well, with excellent frame pacing and general stability. The main takeaway from my testing though really does come back to the high VRAM requirements, with the extreme preset using almost 8GB of memory even at 1080p. Actual processing requirements though aren't unreasonably high, as proven by the RX 580 and RX 5500 XT 8GB, but if you do have a GPU with lesser VRAM, you will want to dial back a few settings. So then guys, that really is going to do it for this video. If you liked it, please do toss me a thumbs up, and as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Please do also subscribe and ding that notification bell if you haven't already, and why not come tell me what you think over in our Discord server, which is linked in the description. While there, you can also find a link to our merch store, and it'd be awesome if you would consider backing us on Patreon, where you can see some of our content early and get access to exclusive giveaways. That is really it for this one though guys. I'm Dominic, and I'll see you in the next video.